What is child abuse? Child abuse is not just physical violence direct at the child, it is any form of maltreatment by an adult which is violence or threatening for the child. This include neglect. So, ang child abuse daw, dili lang siya nag-base through physical violence like pangkulata, gisumbag ka, bukbok ka, wala lang siya nag-base na. Also, nag-base po siya sa maltreatment like kanang pang-aabuso, pagbanta, ngay ana. And also pagtrato. This includes neglect. So, include na diri ang neglect kanang walay pag-care sa imuha, walay pag-amping kanang part good na gusto ka mangayo og tabang pero dili ka nila tabangan tungod wala sila pag-care sa imo. There are 5 general types of child abuse. Physiological, emotional, physiological abuse, physical neglect, emotional and physiological neglect, social abuse. So, physical. So, we know naman siguro kung unsa ang physical. Physical is kanang sumbagon ka, na kay mabunog, nga na, sumbagon ka. Emotional and physiological abuse. So, emotional ka nang anaon ka na through emotion pamaagi sa pagbuli sa imuha like pangit ka. Really na ni mo anak ka nang duot jud sa imong dughan. So, physiological abuse is kanang pang-aabuso. Like ano niya kanang siksiki siya ba kanang lamion kay siya. Ana bastusun ka like yana. Physical neglect. So, the child does not care. Does not receive the care. So, kanang part na kanang mangayo ka kuan saya ka, mangayo ka og kanang gusto ka tagaan kanyag baglan tagaan pud kanyag care ba kay kanang nasakitan ka na palaban ka pero wala nila gihatag sa imuha. One night physical neglect. So, emotional physiological neglect will be the next reporter.
Emotional or psychosocial neglect. Continuous lack of positive attention for the child. Ignoring the child's need for love, warmth, and security. This category also covers cases in which children are witnesses to violence between their parents or caregivers. So it is a relationship pattern in which an individual or a child's affectional needs are consistently disregarded, ignored, invalidated, and unappreciated. A parent does not provide the basic emotional care, affection, and attention that the child needs. For example, there's a child who tells their parent that they're sad about something or someone who is a friend. But then, the parent brushes it off as a childhood game instead of listening and helping the child cope up with it. So, in result, the child begins to learn that their emotional needs are not important, so they stop seeking support instead. Sexual abuse. Sexual contact which an adult forces upon a child. So it does not only include adults, women or men, but also a child. It is a sexual behavior or a sexual act forced upon a person or a child without their consent. This includes sexual harassment, demanding sex in return for favors, sexual abuse of children, sexual abuse of mentally or physically disabled person, and rape. So in the child's sexual abuse, physical force or violence is rarely used. Rather, the perpetrator tries to manipulate the child's trust and hide abuse. So the child is forced to keep the sexual abuse secret and initially feels trapped and helpless. So the perpetrator may have made threats to manipulate and will form fear within the child. So next is about the causes of child abusing. So first is being a single parent. So one possibility is that children in two-parent families do better because of the increased resources available to them, while single parents only have one income coming into the house. Children are placed at a greater risk of poverty and its associated stress. On top of that, single parents often have to spend a greater proportion of their income on child care because they do not have a co-parent to stay home with the child while they work. Next is being poor. So poor children are at a greater risk for several outcomes, which includes abuse and neglect. It is possible that experiencing poverty generates family stress, which in turn leads to greater likelihood of abuse or neglect. Or perhaps parents living in poverty do not have access to the resources necessary and are unable to provide appropriate care of children. Next is having problems with drugs or an alcohol use disorder. Children raised by parents with such problems or substance use disorder are at a greater risk of carrying that trauma into adulthood. A child may feel emotionally and physically neglected and unsafe. They may develop extreme guilt and self-blame for a parent's substance abuse. Next is having a mental problem, such as personality disorder or low self-esteem. So, mental illness of a parent is often considered to be a risk factor for child abuse, and having a combination of these factors, like being a single parent, poor, having problems with drugs, and mental problem, can make a parent more likely to neglect or abuse a child. Next is effects of child abuse. Harm experienced in childhood can have significant and lasting effects, and children can respond differently to what has occurred. So, children who experience abuse and neglect are more likely to form any kinds of effect, or they may react differently to situations. So now, we will tackle or discuss to you the different effects of child abuse.
Children may experience a range of emotional, physiological, and physical problems as a result of being harmed, including the following: low self-esteem, or like mag-struggle ang isa ka bata to ask what she or he needed. Like, maulo siya mag-ask. Ganun. And distrust of adults or difficulty forming relationships with others. So, sabot naman kayo na like na siya trust issues. Siguro epekto to sa pang-aabuso. That's why na siya trust issues sa bisan kinsa. So, lisod siya mohimog other relationships sa uban. And mental health disorders such as anxiety, attachment, post-traumatic stress, and depression disorders. So, diri na part medyo sabot na pud kaayo na isa sa mga main reason sa pang-abuso ay isa sa mga pinaka-cause or pinaka-main cause sa abuse or sa child abuse is ang anxiety and depression, and violent, aggressive, or criminal behavior or other behavioral problems. So, diri na part tungod siguro sa pang-aabuso sa iyaha or sa bisan kinsang nag-abuso siya. So, gusto po siguro niya na ma-experience kung sayang na-experience na pang-aabuso. That's why mahimo na siyang violent or mahimo na siyang kriminal or unsa pa din na. And drug and alcohol abuse and high risk of sexual behavior. So dire sabotable naman kay na ning ana ang resulta sa child abuse. So in my own opinion, dili jud tama na abusuhon ang mga bata, especially bata edad og mga na siguro sa 5 until 10 years old. So dili dapat siya abuso. Instead, ihatag na lang iyang needs or what. So diri ana part kaning na self-harming or suicidal thoughts. Siguro kini siya is isa siya sa mga main reason sa depression and anxiety. And yes, mutuo ko sa self-harming or suicidal thoughts because siguro sa cause sa anxiety and sa depression. Kay para sa ako, having an anxiety and depression is dili siya easy. Makahuna-huna jud ka na okay, siguro suicide ang susi or suicide ang solution sa problema sa anxiety and depression.